Okay, Namo Myo Rengekyo. How you doing? I hope you're in good health and secure. We are going to start the penultimate Go of this assemblage, this book that I created on a collection of Go that specifically deal with aspects of Mandala or Gohonzon. Yeah, and this one is called or titled On Chanting. And as you know, and I've discussed this many times in reading the Gosho Zenshu as well as the Nichiren Shu's propagation, translations, cultural bias, language bias, blah, blah, blah. There is some question, and if you'll recall, I read from Jacqueline Stone's wonderful scholarship, a deep dive, a whole dissertation on this question of authenticity of Nichiren's voluminous letters and treatises, yeah? So this treatise titled On Chanting, it might be questionable whether it was Nichiren himself who wrote this or whether it was one of his senior disciples after the fact. Regardless, it contains Nichiren doctrine and represents an important discussion. So with that in mind, if something seems like doesn't sound authentic, I've called that kind of stuff out in the past in my whole Nichiren Gosho playlist, which I cover the entire Zenshu catalog. I point out that some of the things, they don't have the voice, the sound of Nichiren. That doesn't mean that there's not good advice or practical knowledge, but, I don't gloss over that simply because our objective, my objective here, is not only to be honest and truthful, but to maintain the dignity of Shakyamuni's teachings, right? So I'm seeing, as I pre-read a little bit of this in my little blurb ahead of the On Chanting, that I repeated a whole section here. So I have some revisions to make in this book. I'll do that very soon. It is available as an ebook. I don't know if I made it available as an actual print book or not. But threefoldlotus.com, ebooks page, right? You can download this book. And with, all of that said, this one is subtitled Nichiren, the Shramana of Japan, which we haven't seen very often, maybe less than a handful of times in the entire compendium of Gosho, right? So that's why I started out by saying, All right, often mistranslated as prayer, this is my words now, this word, as in many sutra and Nichiren's letters, is about chanting. The dictionary defines chant as, quote, a chant is the iterative speaking or singing of words or sounds, often primarily on one or two main pitches called reciting notes. Chants may range from a simple melody involving a limited set of notes to highly complex musical structures, often including a great deal of repetition of musical subphrases, such as the great responsories and offertories of Gregorian chants, right? A lot of people know about the Gregorian chants. Chant may be considered speech, music, or a heightened or stylized form of speech. In the latter Middle Ages, some religious chants evolved into song. A chant is the iterative speaking or singing of words or sounds, often primarily on one or two main pitches called reciting tones. Yeah, we read that again. There's a repetition here. So it's important to realize, as I've said before, two underlying concepts of chanting are the often stated in sutras and commentaries that the voice is the intonation or the invocation of Buddha. Buddha is found in the voice, right? So this is this relationship of our samsaric reality to our Gohonzon mind, right? We have to awaken it. Hello, it's kind of like an alarm clock. With the voice, we can bring to the fore our Buddha-ness. Yeah? All right. And also, the chanting isn't necessarily just words. They're sounds. Again, the aspect of chanting that we focus on with Nichiren's scholarship of the Lotus Sutra, the lifespan of the Tathagata chapter, is the invocation of, right? It's not simply saying the title of the Lotus Sutra, but the title in its meaning, right? Not unlike this scroll behind me and its use as a mandala, it's an actual embodiment, an actualization of, right? All right, so let's get started. Nichiren begins. In the context of Nichiren's, that's still me. In the context of Nichiren's doctrine of awakening through the Myoho Renge-kyo, the chant is always in the company of the mandala. Even when we chant in the day, while away from our homes in Butsudan, we visualize our path, our bodies, and our voices in concert with the apparatus that begets our enlightenment, the mind, right? Performing, if you will, the very process or actions of the ceremony in the sky, which is what we're actually performing, embodying by sitting in front of our Butsudan open treasure tower, right? Conceptually, on the mandala, we are performing that very ceremony of the Lotus Sutra, yes? As we detach from our mundane world to float into our Buddhahood. In this letter, I have bolded a few passages as a reminder to read this letter with the visualization of the act of singing into our enlightened mind. And now we end my little prelude, okay? So, Nichiren begins with a question. Of the types of chanting that one offers based on the teachings of the Flower Garland Sutra, the Dharma Characteristics School, the Three Treatises School, the Three Hinayana Schools, the True Word School, or the Tendai School, which type is effective? So again, Nichiren is talking to an audience of the entirety of the Japanese nation, which is very conditioned into these other schools. And so the question is, well, so who's superior? We know who's superior, but now Nichiren is going to address this question, right? Because they all seem to have a component of chanting. So why is the Lotus chanting, the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, superior? That's not exactly the question, but that's the intent, right? Answer. Since they represent the preaching of the Buddha, they can all in some sense be considered chanting. But chanting that is based upon the Lotus Sutra is a chanting that is certain to be fulfilled. Now, the subtext under that, I'm sure you understand, is that the chanting of the Lotus Sutra is an invocation, not a mere repetition of words, but an invocation of the Gohonzon mind, the state, the experience of Buddha-ness, which all of the other recitations of other sects, they don't pretend to do that. They don't state that they do that. They're ineffectual in doing that. This is Nichiren's statement, right? So the follow-up question is, what's the reason for that? Why yours is so much better, yeah? Answer. The persons of the two vehicles, Sravakas, learning, and Pratyeka Buddha, realization, Though they spent kalpas, numerous as the dust particles of the land, practicing the sutras that correspond to the four flavors, could never attain Buddhahood. Right? This is stated repeatedly throughout the sutras. But by listening to the Lotus Sutra for just an instant, they became Buddhas. This is accounted in the Lotus Sutra, right? When finally these people of incorrigible disbelief were also admitted into the fraternity of enlightenment. Once they practice the Lotus Sutra, once they practice the Myoho Renge Kyo, they invoke Buddhahood. There is no censorship here. If you know how to invoke Buddhahood, then you invoke Buddhahood. It doesn't matter anything you've done before. This works. This is the method for self-enlightenment. That's the Lotus teaching, yes? For this reason, Shariputra, Mahakashyapa, and the others who make up the 1,200 arhats and the 12,000 arhats, and all the others of the two vehicles who attained Buddhahood will certainly respond to the chanting of those who practice the Lotus Sutra, and they will take upon themselves the pains of such practitioners. Now that's a little bit of a word salad. Not sure that it really sounds like Nichiren, but it does encapsulate the teachings of Nichiren. Therefore, it is stated in the, quote, Belief and Understanding chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the world-honored one in his great mercy makes a use of a rare thing, in pity and compassion, teaching and converting, bringing benefit to us. In numberless millions of kalpas, who could ever repay him? Though we offer him our hands and feet, bow our heads in respectful obeisance, and present all manner of offerings, none of us could repay him. Though we lift him on the crown of our heads, bear him on our two shoulders, for kalpas numerous as Ganges sands, reverence him with all our hearts. Though we come and with delicate foods, with countless jeweled robes, with articles of bedding, various kinds of potions and medicines, with oxhead sandalwood, and all kinds of rare gems, construct memorial towers and spread the ground with jeweled robes, though we were to do all this by way of offering for kalpas numerous as Ganges sands, still we could not repay him. Well, of course, right? Because this is all samsaric offerings. How can you repay enlightenment? There's only one way, is to be enlightened, right? That was Shakyamuni's goal. Once again, this rhetoric sounds like the rhetoric of a follower, a major disciple of Nichiren's. Doesn't really sound like Nichiren's voice, does it? And yet, it stands as a point clearly made. It continues, in this passage from the sutra, the four great voice hearers, having heard the message of the simile and parable chapter and learned how they can become Buddhas, are expounding on how difficult it is to repay one's debt of gratitude to the Buddha and to the Lotus Sutra. It's just exalting that this method for self-enlightenment is beyond repayment. It is so well beyond the fold of samsaric, right, gratuities. That's how vaulted, reverential this ability to enlighten ourselves is. Just, it's the maximal expression of life, yes? How do you repay that? Only by living that life. Truly. It's not a samsaric negotiation, yeah? Therefore, we can understand that to persons of the two vehicles, the practitioners of this sutra are more important than a father or a mother, than a beloved child, than their own two eyes or their body and life itself. So really, really, you need to understand that this isn't just a ritual and a something that we do to entertain ourselves. This is This is life itself. Though I do not think, it continues, that the great voice hearers such as Shariputra and Madhyalayana would actually cast aside a practitioner who praised any of the teachings put forth by the Buddha in the course of his lifetime, still it is likely that they feel a small degree of resentment toward the various sutras that were preached previous to the Lotus Sutra. Oh, interesting statement, right? Once you know the way, you think, well, I've practiced for years, 10 years, 20 years, longer, all of these other teachings, and now you tell me? Kind of upsetting. I wasted all that time. Well, that's not the proper way to think. It just took you, your path, to go through all of those things to finally get here. You should praise the fact that you're here in your lifetime, yes? Nonetheless, this is because in them a strong warning has been given that, quote, within the Buddha's teachings they, voice hearers, are like seeds that have already been spoiled, end quote, right? They've been castigated for a long time. You don't know what you think you know. This has been repeated and put on them, right? And now finally, okay, now you know. And instead of being joyous about it, they're a little bit, why didn't you tell us this before? Well, you weren't ready. But now these voice hearers have thus come ones such as flower glow, rare form, universal brightness, a most unexpected stroke of good fortune. They must feel as though the Kunlun Mountains have split open and they were able to enter those jewel-filled mountains. That is why the passage of appreciation says, quote, this cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. We didn't expect it, right? Again, this doesn't sound like Nichiren, but it does echo his doctrines and his elucidations of Shakyamuni's teachings, does it not? We'll continue. Sorry I keep repeating that, but I want you to understand that Nichiren's effect on us, you and I, is unmistakable. But his voice has nuances in it that maybe are not as profound. There's a bit of repetition here in what we've already heard from Nichiren, right? So there can be no doubt that all persons of the two vehicles will protect the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Even lowly creatures know enough to repay a debt of gratitude. Thus, the bird known as the wild goose will invariably carry out its filial duty to the mother bird when she's about to die, and the fox never forgets its old hillcock. If even animals will do such things, then how much more should this be true of human beings? So this voice sounds like a compassionate inculcation of Nichiren's teachings to those who are migrating to Nichiren's doctrine, migrating to the practice of the Lotus Sutra from these other sects, Nembutsu, Zen, True Words, etc. Right? It seems addressed to them specifically, doesn't it? A man named Wang Shu was traveling along a road when he became hungry and weary. Beside the road was a plum tree that was loaded with fruit. Wang Shu ate the fruit and thereby satisfied his hunger. But he said to himself, quote, I have eaten the fruit of this plum tree and thus restored my strength and spirits. It would not be right if I failed to repay this debt of gratitude. So saying, he took off his robe and hung it on the plum tree before going on his way. A man named Wang Yin was traveling along a road when he became thirsty. Crossing a river, he drank some water, and then he tossed a coin into the river as payment for the water he had drank. A dragon will invariably protect a monk who is wearing a Buddhist surplice. The reason is that the dragon once received a Buddhist surplice from the Buddha, and placing it around its beloved child in the dragon palace was able to prevent the child from being eaten by Garuda birds. Right? This is old folklore from India, yes? A Garuda bird will invariably protect one who acts with filial duty toward one's parents. Dragons would shake Mount Sumeru and eat the beloved chicks of the Garuda bird after they fell from their nests. But the Buddha instructed the Garuda bird to take the offerings of rice that Buddhist monks set aside from the alms given them by filial persons, and to place these offerings on top of Mount Sumeru. In this way, the Garuda bird was able to prevent its chicks from being eaten by dragons. All of that is about life-affirming causes, right? Causes that offer dignity to life. This is a constant theme in Buddhism, yes? Heaven will invariably protect a person who observes the precepts and practices goodness. There it is. If people who are born into human realm do not observe the precepts of practice of goodness, then when they die, they will be in most cases reborn in the realm of Asuras. And if those in the realm of Asuras become very numerous, they will grow arrogant and will invariably offend against heaven. Now, see, that sounds a little religious. That doesn't sound truly Nichiren. However, if people who are born into the human realm observe the precepts and practice goodness, when they die, and we should see this as a moment-to-moment, birth, death, in the moment-to-moment, birth-death cycle, they will invariably be reborn in the realm of heavenly beings. Enlightened, right? And if those in the realm of heavenly beings become very numerous, the Asuras will be frightened and they won't dare offend against heaven. This is the benefit of, right? Not Hendoku Yaga, but Itai Doshin, many embody one in mind, right? The influence, the radiating into our environment that Buddha-ness, as bodhisattvas, is mirrors in our environment what we would call in samsara a protection. But it's not actually protection as much as it is a positive influence that you yourself have created by your practice, radiating into your environment. How could it fail to radiate it back? Just like a mirror, right? Nichiren uses that mirror analogy all the time. And that's what this fumbling dialogue is talking about. Persons of the two vehicles are more excellent in the virtue gained from their observance of the precepts and more astute in wisdom than ordinary people in the six paths, people who are not Buddhas. Therefore, how could they possibly ever abandon those who practice the Lotus Sutra, since the Lotus Sutra is the means that has enabled them to attain Buddhahood? Right? Again, stating the same thing. If you've found a practice that instantiates your full potential, why would you hinder anyone else from doing the same? Simple, right? Moreover, although the bodhisattvas and ordinary people had practiced the teachings of the various sutras preached in the 40 and more previous years to the Lotus Sutra for a period of countless kalpas in order to become Buddhas, none ever succeeded in attaining Buddhahood. They were always preparing. They didn't know that, but they were able to attain Buddhahood by practicing the Lotus Sutra. What is practicing the Lotus Sutra? Chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, right? Nichiren would say that specifically at this point, wouldn't he? And now these Buddhas of the worlds of the 10 directions are endowed with the 32 features and the 80 characteristics that distinguish a Buddha and are looked up to by living beings in the other 9 realms, just as stars clusters about the moon, as the 8 mountains surround Mount Sumeru, as the people of the 4 continents look up to the sun, or as common people look up to a wheel-turning king, and is the fact that these Buddhas are looked up to in this manner not due to the benefit and the rewards of the Lotus Sutra. Yeah, this is quite obviously written by a disciple. But now this is called on-chanting. So really, wherever it says practice of the Lotus Sutra, we should enter Namo Myo Renge Kyo, because this is about chanting. Specifically the Daimoku, wouldn't you say? Interesting. Therefore, in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha gives this warning, quote, "There is no need to enshrine the relics of the Buddha here." Right? Don't lock your practice onto samsaric things. And the Nirvana Sutra says, quote, "What the Buddhas take as their teacher is the law. Therefore, the thus come ones honor, respect, and make offerings to it," end quote. And this is part and parcel of what we do when we chant. When we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, we are offering our samsaric existence to the mind of enlightenment. We are switching gears, yes? And that's all that needs to be reverential. We are invoking our enlightened mind. We don't need a talisman for that. Here's a relic of something. Here's a brilliant picture or a statue I'm taking with me. See, I'm good. No, this is an occurrence in the mind. This is why this scroll has this mandala aspect to help us penetrate our own mind. It's a mirror to get us to our Gohonzon mind, our portal from samsaric existence to full potential, understanding, experiencing the moment-to-moment instantiation of life, Buddha-ness, total equanimity. The Buddhas, because they were enlightened by the Lotus Sutra, by Myoho Renge Kyo, were able to attain Buddhahood. Therefore, if they should fail to preach the sutra to others, they would be withholding from others the seeds of Buddhahood and would be committing a fault. It's a strong exhortation for bodhisattva behavior, yeah? For this reason, the thus come one Shakyamuni made his appearance in this Saha world and prepared to preach it. But the devil king of the sixth heaven, Dairokuten no Mao, right? Otherwise known as the fundamental darkness, never heard that before, not from Nichiren, took possession of the bodies of the people and caused them to hate the Buddha and impede his preaching. Negative karma, negative energies, right? Thus the king known as Virudaka killed 500 people of the Shakya clan. Angulimala chased after the Buddha. Devadatta rolled a huge stone down on him. And Chincha, the daughter of a Brahmin, tied a bowl to her belly and claimed to be pregnant with the Buddha's child. Right? Shakyamuni is who they're talking about. He met many obstacles. Well, isn't that typical? Right? Nichiren talks about this all the time. The lord of the Brahma city proclaimed a fine of 500 ryo of gold should be levied against anyone who invited the Buddha into the city. Shakyamuni Buddha, that is. Not Buddha, Buddha-ness. It's confusing, isn't it? As a result, the people of the city blocked the road with thorns, threw filth into the wells, built a barricade of spikes at the gate, and put poison in the Buddha's food, Shakyamuni's food, all because of their hatred of him. But their hatred of him wasn't built on fact, it was built on politic. The nun Utpalavarna was murdered. Malagyayana was killed by Brahmins of the bamboo staff school, and Kalodayin was buried in horse dung, all because of animosity toward Shakyamuni Buddha. Nevertheless, Shakyamuni managed to survive these various ordeals, and at the age of 72, 42 years after he first began preaching the Buddhist teachings at a mountain called Girakuta, northeast of the city of Rajgriha in central India, he began to preach the Myoho Renge-kyo. He preached it for a period of 8 years. Then, on the bank of the Ajitavati River in the city of Kushinagara in eastern India, in the middle of the night on the 15th day of the second month, when he was 80 years of age, he entered nirvana, extinction. So this sounds like an excellent student of Nichiren writing this down, recording this down for future generations, yes? But before that, he had revealed his enlightenment in the form of the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, the words of this sutra are indeed the very soul, the very essence of Shakyamuni, the thus come one, the teachings, the experience of Shakyamuni's enlightenment. Soul. Jeez. Yeah, I definitely have to go through this book again. It's amazing. And since every single word constitutes the essence of the Buddha, of Shakyamuni's enlightenment, Shakyamuni, thus come one, will protect those who practice this sutra as though they were protecting his very own eyes. He will accompany them just as a shadow accompanies a body. How then could the chanting of such persons not be answered? Answered? Or call response, not an answer so much as a response, right? Because this is what the Lotus Sutra is. The Lotus Sutra is a method, this should say response, for invoking, for calling on our Buddha-ness. So the response is Buddha-ness. During the first 40 and more years of the Buddha's teachings, the Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, the various bodhisattvas had tried to attain Buddhahood through the sutras, beginning with the Flower Garland Sutra, but they were unable to do so. But when the Expedient Means chapter of the Lotus Sutra was preached, announcing the concise replacement of the three vehicles with the one vehicle, then the bodhisattvas seeking to be Buddhas in the great force of 80,000, as well as the wheel-turning kings who come from the 10,000s of millions of lands, all press their palms and with reverent minds wish to hear the teaching of the perfect endowment. And when, as a result, they heard the expanded replacement of the three vehicles with the one vehicle, then it was as the sutra states, quote, when the bodhisattvas hear this law, they will be released from all entanglements of doubt, end quote. Interesting word, entanglements, yeah? Where are we time-wise? After that, bodhisattvas from this world and from other regions assembled together like gathering clouds, or so many stars. And when the Treasure Tower chapter was preached, the Buddhas of the 10 directions gathered round, each accompanied by countless numbers of bodhisattva. Puts it on scroll, right? Manjushri appeared from the sea, accompanied by countless bodhisattvas, and in addition there were the 800,000 million nayutas of bodhisattvas, you and I, and the bodhisattvas more numerous than the sands of the 8 Ganges rivers, the bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds who emerged from the earth, there we are, the bodhisattvas as numerous as the sands of 680,000 millions nayutas of Ganges rivers who appeared in the Distinctions in Benefits chapter, the bodhisattvas multiplied 1,000 times, the bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particle of a world, the bodhisattvas as numerous as dust particles of major world systems, the bodhisattvas as on and on and on and on and on and on and on. In other words, all those who would practice self-enlightenment. Namo Myoho Renge-kyo. Every mind. There were 84,000 bodhisattvas of the Medicine chapter, the 84,000 bodhisattvas and 42,000 heavenly sons of the Wonderful Sound chapter, on and on and on. This just eliciting, once again, the audience of the ceremony in the sky, the Lotus Sutra, right? If we were to count up all these bodhisattvas, they would be as numerous, and here we go into big numbers that we can't conceive, because this is timeless. This is all of sentient minds, all potential. This teaching is for all of sentient mindedness. The Venerable Mahakashyapa lives on mountain Kukutapada. Manjushri lives on Mount Clear and Cool. Bodhisattva Earth Repository lives on Mount Karadiya. Perceiver of the world's sounds lives on Mount Potalaka. Bodhisattva Maitreya lives in the Tushita heaven. Nanda and the countless other dragon kings and Ashura kings live at the bottom of the sea, and at the seaside, Shakra lives in the heavens, on and on and on. Now, we're just talking about potential sentient minds, right? Bodhisattvas are human sentient minds. These people, these personages, are the potential for the potential. Just this was written to be extremely inclusive, basically to make the point that there is no higher teaching, that this is it. It has now been over 2,200 years since the Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra. Human beings have a shorter lifespan, and therefore there are no persons alive today who have seen Shakyamuni Buddha with their own eyes. But you can experience Buddha with your own eyes because it's a mind perception experience. But in the heavenly realm, the span of a day is long, and the beings there have long lives. As a result, there are countless heavenly beings still alive who have seen Shakyamuni Buddha and listened to him preach the Lotus Sutra. In other words, the sound, the reverberations of the mind of Buddha, it's always present, right? Because it's simply a potential for the sentient mind to invoke. It's irrespective of time. It's timeless, right? This is in the meditations we do in Gangyo, in the second meditation. 50 years in the life of a human being is equivalent to no more than 1 day and 1 night in the lives of beings in the heaven of the 4 heavenly kings. Another analogy trying to break time, right? Because samsaric beings were so linear. This comes before that, and therefore there is space and there is time, and we're very preoccupied with time. But when you attain enlightenment to see the process of life, the entire universe, your life, their lives, the lives of things, then time becomes rather irrelevant. Right? We know this when we chant. For anyone who's chanted for over 30 minutes forgets how long they've been chanting, forgets the time has been going by, because the involvement, the being of enlightenment is so powerful an experience that it transcends time. Hence, from the point of view of the deities of the sun and moon and the heavenly king Vaishravana, it has been only 44 days or less than 2 months since the Buddha has passed away. And from the point of view of Shakra and Brahma, not even a month nor even an hour has passed since the Buddha departed. Again, we're playing with time here. We're saying, yes, Shakyamuni lived 3,000 years ago. But really, Shakyamuni's enlightenment, his Buddha realization, it's alive right now. All you got to do is open the door. So this is a weird way to kind of compress time and let time go as not a factor in your enlightenment, right? Because those who don't understand might think, well, yeah, I'll practice this, and it's all very well and good that I'm practicing this, but Shakyamuni's been dead 3,000 years. How am I going to, right? It's an earthbound, samsaric kind of thought that simply ignorant does not understand that Buddha is now. It's always now, because it's an experience, not a time. It's an experience, not a thing. It's not handed to you. It's something you hand to yourself. You experience to yourself, right? You want to experience the coolness of water on your hand because you're hot or sweaty or whatever. You can talk about it all day long, but stick your hand in the water, you experience it, period. There's no time to that. There's no, I'm not old enough to stick my hand in the water yet, right? How silly would that be? Also true of Buddhahood. Therefore, we know that the chanting offered by a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra will be answered, will be responded, just as an echo answers a sound. Now that's closer to what we're really talking about here. The echo isn't manufactured separately. It is a radiation of the sound. Like we radiate Buddhahood and it's reflected back to us in our environment. They're the same source, really. It's cause-effect. It's immediate. As a shadow follows form, as reflections of the moon appears in clear water, as a mirror collects dewdrops, as a magnet attracts iron, as amber attracts particles of dust, or as a clear mirror reflects the color of an object. Okay. All right. I'll continue in the next video. An interesting letter, an interesting writing. Again, I'm not sure that this is the words of Nichiren himself, although it's a clear repetition of what Nichiren has taught. I suspect this would be a writing of a close disciple taking notes at a discussion Nichiren had with them. This is a rather long letter, so I'm sure we'll find... Yeah, so there's quotes here like we've heard... Oh, no. The real aspect of Gohonzon will be the last Gosho in this book. Yeah, there's some interesting quotes here that undoubtedly are Nichiren's words, but I think they're couched into a disciple achieving his own scholarship, right, of Nichiren's teachings. Anyway, we'll continue in the next video. Thank you for listening, participating. Please remember to like and subscribe. It does a lot for the growth of this Sangha to make this resource available to as many people as possible. It is a bodhisattva thing to do, right? And don't forget ebooks on threefoldlotus.com. Lots of free information on threefoldlotus.com. I'll just remind you on the core teaching, core study materials page, right? There's also the bookstore, the Mandala store, but you can download the Mandala as a PDF on threefoldlotus.com, right? And therefore you could print it out on, if you have some handmade paper or whatever, make sure it's stable, respectful, not distracting, obviously. And with all of that, once again, I'm super proud of your practice, thankful for your practice. Please, mind your health and those around you. Be kind, and I'll see you in the next one. All right? Okay, bye for now.